Tonight, we travel east to a wall that stretches not only across miles, but across centuries. The Great Wall of China. Vast, legendary, sometimes seen from the heavens, and more often remembered for what it kept out. Tonight, we won't follow the generals. We won't trace the towers or the tactics. We'll look down to the foundation, to the men who built it. This isn't the story of brilliance or glory. It's the story of blistered hands, cracked heels. It's the story of those sent to the frontier with no intention of coming home. Conscripted peasants, convicts, these are the ones who carved the path, stone by stone. And as we drift tonight into the windswept passes and dry northern ridges, we'll step quietly alongside them, and later we'll wander through the emperor's dreams, the graves that followed the mortar, and the soft lives of those who never once saw the wall, but sipped peach wine in its shadow. So breathe in, let the dust settle, and come with us into the quiet ache of history. It is barely dawn. A cold wind, sharp and dry, slicing through your robe and into your ribs. You stir from the hard ground, no mattress. He's still breathing. The bell clangs at the camp's edge. Not a temple bell. Not a temple bell. Not a bell of peace. A work bell. It means the overseer is awake, and he expects you to be too. You rise slowly. Your back aches. Your feet are cracked. You slept in your clothes. You splash water on your face from a bucket. The surface is rimmed with ice. You do not react. You've long since stopped reacting. Breakfast is a ladle of thin millet porridge. You eat quickly. Not because you in a hurry, but because the others will take more. If you don't eat, half a lima be, past stacks of stone and logs and baskets of lime, you wrap a cloth around your mouth to keep it out, but it never helps. It enters. The sight is enormous. Not a palace, not a city. Endless wall, a skeleton of tamped earth and dry stone, climbing a ridge like a scar. You and the others take your places. You don't speak. Hall. You carry baskets of bricks, 2 at a time, suspended from a wooden pole over your shoulders. You take them from the pile and walk over the edge, your hands blistered in the first month, then the skin hardened, then cracked again when the weather turned. You wrap them in rags when you can. The overseer doesn't like rags. He says they slow you down. Sometimes someone collapses. A man will stagger. If he rises, he works. If not, he is dragged off. That's the rule. In the evenings, if you're lucky, you return with your breath. And maybe, if the quartermaster hasn't counted too closely, you can sneak a drink of rice wine. Someone smuggled in from a trader. It burns, but it's warm. You've been here for 4 months, or 6. You don't know anymore. The seasons change, but there's no calendar. You remember snow? Then the black flies that bite your neck while you work. Others, as conscripts, you were taken from your farm after the tax was too high. You thought it would be 1 winter. That was 3 winters ago. You haven't seen your family since. No one writes. No one sends food. You carve your name into the base of one stone. No one will see it. At night, you sleep where you dropped. Sometimes beside a half-finished tower. Sometimes in a shallow cave dug for the purpose. The stars are sharp and many. There is no roof. You dream of rice and warm soup and green. But in the morning, and the wall grows. Now we step back from the dust and stone into the halls of a man who would bind a continent together. Not with silk, not with faith, but with fear and with walls. He was called Qin Shi Huang I, Emperor of Qin. Before him, China was a fractured land of warring states. After him, it was something new, unified, named, controlled, and ringed with stone. When Qin Shi Huang rose to power in the 3rd century BCE, he saw enemies everywhere. To the south, rebellious tribes. To the north, the Xiongnu nomadic horsemen who slipped past borders, raided villages. The emperor wanted security, but more than that, he wanted permanence. So he ordered walls, long, connected, coordinated walls. Not the first to build them, but the first to imagine them as a single, vast line across the north, a spine of sovereignty. He mobilized the empire to do it. Not with armies though, hundreds of thousands of workers, conscripted peasants, soldiers on punishment, criminals avoiding execution. They were sent to the edges of civilization with tools. The walls rose quickly. Earth was tamped down between wooden frames. In dry regions, stone was used. Each stretch of wall had its own design. This was not art. It needed to be tall, long, visible, and above all, feared. The cost was immense. Historical records often exaggerated, but rooted in truth speak of thousands dying. Some say hundreds of thousands. Heat stroke, starvation, collapse, bandits, exposure. Officials wrote of bones scattered along the work sites. Mothers wrote of sons who never came home. Qin Shi Huang did not mourn them. He dreamed of a China that would last forever. And in his vision, he built not only walls, but canals, roads, standard measurements, writing reforms, and the first national census. He banned books that displeased him, and in death, he left behind a mausoleum, but the wall he's walled not die with him. Later, dynasties expanded it, modified and moved it. But the dream was his, a border you could see from a mountain. He never visited most of it. He likely never saw the men who carved their names into hidden bricks, who bled into the mortar. But the wall spoke for him, and in the howling wind that rolls across those ridge lines today, sometimes it still does. The Great Wall winds like a scar through northern China, over mountains, across deserts, through lonely valleys, where even the birds hesitate. But beneath the bricks and stone, there are other layers, not visible, not measured, but felt. There is silence. For centuries, locals spoke of bones in the wall, of workers buried alive inside its foundations, of men who collapsed where they stood and were sealed into the mortar by overseers who saw no sense in delay. Was it true? Modern archaeology suggests most workers who died were likely buried nearby. But in some places, scattered remains have been found and marked just there. And in the wind, one story tells of a woman Meng Zhongnu whose husband was taken from their home to labor on the wall. Months, then years. No letters, no word. She set off alone, walking through wind and snow, following the length of the wall, until she found his name among the dead. She wept. Not quietly, but with such grief that part of the wall collapsed. The emperor heard of her sorrow. Some say he ordered her death. No one agrees. But the story was told for generations, not in the capital, but in villages, around low fires, as a quiet protest, as a memory. Other legends whisper of shadowy figures who still haul stones in the dark, of voices that echo on cold nights, singing no songs, only syllables lost to time. Archaeologists, when excavating near older sections of the wall, have uncovered grave goods, combs, charms, scraps of worn silk. They speak of people who brought a piece of home with them, even when they expected never to return. They've also found tools, worn-down shovels, splintered baskets, rusted chisels. These objects tell no grand tale, but they are the punctuation marks of human presence. Even the wall's bricks speak. Some bear inscriptions, not official stamps, but quick scratches by workers etched before the mortar dried. A name, a date, a hometown, a symbol of a bird or fish, proof that someone was there and wanted to be remembered. In one region, a brick was found with a carved message. Whoever carved it is long gone, their village likely dust. They still bloom each spring, far from the wind-blown wall. History often counts rulers, battles, dynasties, but the ghosts of the Great Wall do not come with titles. They come with footprints, with worn rags, with unfinished prayers, with tears dried into clay, and though they are gone, the mountain wind. Now let us turn away from the wind, southward, down the ridges, Chang'an, or a passing thought. Here the air is softer, the roofs curve like brushstroke, and life, though never easy, flows to a gentler rhythm. In the courtyard of a scholar's home, the morning begins with tea. The kettle is clay. The steam rises in spirals. Birds call softly beyond the wall. A breeze stirs the bamboo, but not harshly. This man does not build. He writes. A minor official, perhaps, or the son of a merchant, wealthy enough to buy a quiet post. His days are spent reviewing documents, legal disputes, land titles. He wears cotton robes, sometimes writes it. In the evening, his children practice calligraphy by lamplight. He has heard of the Great Wall, of course. He read a dispatch once, something about brigands repelled near the Jeju Pass. He commented, perhaps, on the discipline of the garrison. He raised a cup of peach wine, pale and sweet, and nodded to the effectiveness of imperial order. Then he forgot. His garden was blooming. His neighbors were hosting a poetry contest. A rare shipment of ink had arrived from the south. There was no time to dwell on stone and wind. Even among the elite, few thought often of the frontier. It was far, it was handled, it served its purpose. The empire was vast, and one could not worry for all of it. In the capital, the bureaucrats drafted policies, but they didn't see the blistered backs, the blood in the dust, the meals of boiled grass. They read reports in neat columns, delivered by men in tidy uniforms. A handful of ivory dice were found in one such house. Near them, a lacquer box of preserved plums. In another estate, fragments of silk embroidered with verses about spring flowers, love, and the fleeting nature of time. There are no records of frostbites or deaths on the wall. Those belonged to others, and yet the men in the frontier camps hold stone not just for defense, but to preserve this world, this comfort, this stillness, this delicate swirl of ink on parchment. The empire endured because of what the wall kept out, and what it kept out was distance, so others could sip in peace. The elite did not ask for this, but they did not stop it. And far away, and now, the wind has gone quiet. The tools have been set down. The fire at the camp's edge burns low. You've walked today not with emperors or generals, but with laborers, with the men who bent their backs to history and left no names behind, with those who hauled. You've seen what it cost to build a border meant to last, not in silver or ink, but in time. You've glimpsed the emperor's dream, and you've stepped softly through its shadows where, and in contrast, you've looked into the lives untouched by stone, the ones who lived inland, whose days passed with plum blossoms and poetry, with soft robes and sweet wine. Because history is not only what we remember, it is also what we forget. The wall still stands in pieces and fragments. Tourists walk along it. Photographs are taken, but the hands that placed each stone are gone quietly. And now your eyes may grow heavy. Let them close. Let the sound of the pick, the cry of the overseer, the whisper of the wind fade. There is no bell to answer, only rest, only silence, only the stars above the wall. Good night, traveler, for drifting through history. Welcome back. Tonight, we cast off into fog, into wind, into water, without end, but not as a captain, not as a noble, and not as a name written in gilded books. Not by choice. The age of exploration brought discovery. Yes, it mapped oceans, it shifted empires, but for those aboard the ships, the ones pulling rope, scrubbing decks, and trying not to die, their experience was far from heroic. This is the story of salt sauce, of prayers whispered before every storm, the cramped deck, the sour breath of your bunkmate, the endless creak of wood you'll eat, sleep, suffer, wait. The ships that vanished without a word, and the comfortable few who never touched a rope, but took all the credit. So find stillness. Feel the sway beneath your thoughts into the ocean fog of history. It begins in darkness. Below deck, there is no sun, only a faint yellow light from a hanging lantern. You haven't stood fully upright in hours. The air is thick, not with smoke or perfume, but with sweat. Mildew. You shift slightly, and a rat scurries past your foot. You don't react. It's the fifth one tonight. You are a sailor, a common one, and beneath the captain's quarters, the ship rocks constantly, even in calm waters. The sea is never still. Your bones know the motion. It has crept into your gait. The floor is wet. It always is. Seawater leaks through the hull. You rise before the sun, if there's sun at all. First task, the ropes, then the deck. You scrub with salt water and a stiff brush, bent low, hands blistered. Salt gets in your wounds. It stings. You get used to it. You have to. Breakfast comes in a wooden bowl. The biscuit is grey. You chew it slowly, hoping your teeth hold. Your breath smells of rot. Your tongue is pale. Fresh water is rationed. It tastes of the barrel musty. You drink it anyway. You have no choice. The day is long. You furl sails in the wind. Your hands are cracked. Your fingernails blackened. You wear the same clothes for weeks. The salt bleaches them. When storms come, you tie yourself to the mast. You do it without thinking now. The wind screams. The waves rise like walls. You close your eyes and pray not to any god in particular, just to the sea itself. Spare us. The rats chew through grain sacks. The weevils live in the biscuits. The officers eat better. They sit at tables. You serve them sometimes. They do not look at you, and still the days pass. Sometimes there is land. You go ashore to fetch water, maybe to cut timber, maybe to bury a crewmate. You dig the grave in silence. More ropes, more salt. You forget what month. Someone dies from a fever. Someone else from falling. Someone else simply slips into the sea one night and isn't found. The captain logs it. The cook divides the rations accordingly. And still the ship sails on. There are no maps for what you feel. The monotony, the ache, the fear of the next storm, the certainty that if you fall ill, no one will stop working to help you. But you continue. Because the voyage must. Because the captain demands it. Because the sea does not care if you suffer. And because below deck, in the dark, there is no other choice. Above deck, the wind cuts clean across the sails. The captain stands at the helm knot, relaxed, but rigid, eyes narrowed against the glare of sea and sky. His coat is heavy wool, his beard salt-streaked. The other holds uncertainty, because for all his authority, there are no accurate charts, no GPS. Only the sun by day, the stars by night, and a shaky sense of distance, counted by dead, reckoning, estimating where you are, based on speed, wind, and hope. Each day, he marks a position on a hand-drawn map. A dot, a note, I guess. And in the space beyond that mark, the unknown, the captain cannot show doubt, his orders crisp. He is father, judge, navigator, and in the minds of the crew, thin wall between life and drowning, anxiety. He watches the crew constantly, watches for signs of hunger that shift into mutiny. He hears the whispered complaints, the cough that won't go away, the grumbling over moldy rations. He knows how quickly obedience can turn. He has a locked chest in his cabin. Inside, sealed orders, often from the crown or the company. Sometimes they contain new destinations, a place no one has ever confirmed exists. He reads them again. And again, they offer little comfort. At night, he adjusts the course, then wonders if it was the right call. Too far north, and ice. Too far west, and nothing but ocean. And yet, he must lead. How many days left? If the wind dies, how many barrels of water? When do you start cutting lemon slices to treat the first signs of scurvy? He keeps a journal, writes in it carefully, usually alone, under the swinging lantern in his cabin. The script is neat, the tone detached. It's not for emotion. It's for legacy, for whoever finds the ship or doesn't. Sometimes he dreams of land, not the kind on maps, a return, but the morning always brings motion, a crewman punished. The wind shifted in the night, the compass is uncertain, or a trick of the eye. No one thanks him. Command, in the age of exploration, was not power. It was weight, and the farther from home, the sea has no memory. It does not mark where a mast cracked, or where a crew cried out for help that never came. It offers no grave, no stone, no closure. It simply folds over and forgets. In the age of exploration, they carried charts, cargo, letters from kings. They were blessed in harbors. They disappeared. No battle, no survivors, no wreckage found, just absence. Some were lost in storms, hurricanes that rose without warning. Some were caught in doldrums weeks without wind, like the Snow Jawa or the Pizarro expeditions. Second Caravel, whose name and fate blurred into silence before it reached open sea. Entire fleets, in some cases, swallowed without resistance. What remains now are fragments, wood waterlogged and worn, a name carved faintly into a plank. Half arrest by time, occasionally a ghost ship is found, still afloat, sails in tatters, crew gone. The journal ends mid-sentence, as if everyone simply stepped away. In colder waters, these wrecks survive longer. In warmer ones, they vanish. Faster wood, eaten by worms, cloth by rot, stories by silence. And then there are the maps. The Northwest Passage, the City of Gold. Some captains chased these illusions. Others were sent to verify them. Many did not return. Their names linger etched on coastlines, mountain ridges, windswept islands. But the men behind the names, gone. Their sails fed fish. Their logbooks dissolved into silt. No cannons, no cries, shallow ones. In Arctic soil, or in dunes, beside forgotten anchorages, bones curled beneath rusted nails and wooden crosses, only that they were here, as if they never were. Now we leave the salt behind. We return to Lantu manicured gardens, tiled courtyards, and quiet studies bathed in morning sun. Here, in Lisbon, in Seville, in London and Venice, the air smells not of tar and bilge, but of polished wood, citrus peels, and ink. This is where the voyagers began, and where their rewards. At a long oak table, his hand is steady, his clothes are linen. He is a sponsor, or a cartographer, sketching coastlines he's never seen. He does not fear storms. He has never tied a sail. Or perhaps he is a chronicler or scribe hired by the crown to write about the voyage, months after it ended. He has a journal from the captain, a few scattered letters, and a need to turn hardship into triumph. So he writes of glory, of vast oceans crossed, of foreign shores encountered, of land claimed in the name of king and god. He does not mention the man who died of fever in the hold, or the sailor swept overboard or the boy who was punished for stealing a mouldy biscuit. These stories don't sell. Meanwhile, account books are updated. Some of the elite, those who never stepped aboard a ship, receive no. Some commission paintings of ships they never saw. One writes a book titled The World as I Heard It. They sip wine and discuss exploration, and in the warm light of the southern coast, another man dies with cracked lips, dreaming of this very fruit. They hold audiences, make speeches, approve the next expedition. The sea, to them, is opportunity. They do not smell the rot. They only count returns. And now, the waves grow calm. The sails are furled. The ropes hang loose. The stars begin their slow turn. Tonight, you lived the voyage. Not the discovery, not the maps in museums, but the hours, the aching joints, the hunger, the stink of mildew, the soft panic of not knowing where you are. You felt the sway of a wooden world afloat on hope and desperation. You stood beside the captain as he guessed. You watched ships vanish completely, and you stepped ashore in a place where others reaped gold while you carried scars. And now it is over. You lie again in your hammock, or your bunk, or your bed. The wood no longer rocks beneath you. The wind no longer howls. The darkness now holds no rats of first steps on foreign sand. But you've seen who made those steps possible. The nameless, the sleepless, the ones who hauled sails and stirred stew and mended holes in the cold. They are not written about. They always were. And perhaps, as you drift toward sleep, you'll remember that most of history was not grand. It was wet, it was quiet, and it was endured. The voyage is behind you, and the steady hush of the sea, for drifting through history. Welcome, listener. Tonight, we descend into the quiet alleys behind the whitewashed columns of the ancient world, not to the agora, not to the Acropolis, but to the back courtyards and smoke-dark kitchens where voices went unheard and names were rarely remembered. This is Athens, city of reason and rhetoric, birthplace of democracy and drama. But beneath the ideals, they had no vote, no rights, no property. Many had no names, They woke before the family did. They slept after the lamps were put out. They fetched water, carried olive oil, raised children not their own. They were the enslaved, and they outnumbered the citizens, poured wine at the symposium, held torches during plays, cleaned the blood from a butcher's stall, and tonight we will walk beside them, not to dramatize, but to witness quietly and without flinching the long endurance of those who were owned. Later we'll meet the slaves, trusted, with money, and the strange half-light of those who managed to win their freedom but not a place in society. But for now, step softly through the stone archway of a modest Athenian home. The fire is already lit. A bronze pot hangs over the coals, and a woman stirs it. You wake before the birds, not to an alarm, not to a bell, but to the rhythm of your own caution. You know how long it takes to light the fire, to fetch water from the well down the street. Your body is sore from the day before. It will be sore again tonight. The stone beneath you is cold, but you don't notice any more. Cold is not something that changes. You move quietly through the courtyard. In the kitchen, you pull the damp cloth off the barley jar. Measure with your hand. The sound is soft, rhythmic. The grinding stone is worn smooth from years of use. So are your hands. As the sun begins to touch the walls of the courtyard, you are already moving through the routine. Sweep the entryway. No one speaks to you. If they do, it is often with a command or correction. Your name may be used, you may be called by your place of origin, or simply referred to as the girl, the boy, the one who pours. You are property, like the pot you carry, like the broom you hold. The mistress of the house nods to you as she enters the kitchen. You pour her tea. She does not look at your face. Later, you are sent to the market. You walk with a basket. You cannot buy without permission. You may not ever run. If you are caught running, you may be branded, or worse. You see other slaves in the market, some barefoot. One is older, limping slightly, as he lifts amphorae for a wine merchant. You nod to each other. No words, just the glance of shared understanding. Back at the house, the mid-morning routine begins. Laundry, cooking, scrubbing the floor of the andron, the men's dining room, though you will never be allowed to sit there during a symposium. If guests arrive, you serve wine. Smile if instructed. If you are young and well-spoken, someone may ask where you came from. You answer politely. You are never alone. There is always something to clean. Rest is not given. Rest is taken in slivers between tasks, in corners, behind closed shutters. There is no privacy, no locked door, no possession you can truly call yours. You hear the children playing in the courtyard. One of them shouts for you. You come always. You help him remove his sandals, light the lamps. Then you slip back to your mat, curling beneath a thin cloth. Listening to laughter and music in the room beyond, you hear cups clink. A flute playing softly. Stories told in a language you understand, but a world you do not belong to. You stare at the ceiling, the person you once were. You do not cry. There is no use. Tomorrow will come, the water fetched, the kitchen swept, and you will wake again before the birds. Not all slaves in Athens Some wore clean robes, carried styluses. These were the oikonomoi, and many were slaves. They spoke well, read fluently, and tracked thousands of drachmas flowing through the hands of their masters. But despite their knowledge, not even the ink they wrote with, their trust was not earned, it was assigned. In the back of a bustling Athenian banking house, the noise is constant. Coins being weighed, clients haggling over interest, a merchant arguing over a missed delivery, and in the corner, at a low table beneath the barred window, an enslaved man counts. He tallies with a wax tablet, flipping back and forth between sheets covered in numbers and symbols. His fingers are quick, his handwriting is careful. The merchant who owns him boasts that he never makes mistakes. He does not speak unless addressed. He bows when new clients enter. Some know he is a slave, some do not. The man who employs him may praise him publicly. He may even give him a small room of his own. If he makes an error, if he is accused of theft, his testimony, not moral. He may have once studied philosophy in another land. He may have spoken 3 languages. But now he carries ledgers, follows orders, and waits. Always waits for a change that will never come. In some cases, a wealthy Athenian might place nearly his entire fortune in the hands of an enslaved steward. Why? Because he had no legal standing. It was control disguised as reward. You might pass such a man in the street, dressed modestly, carrying scrolls, answering to a boy half his age who inherited him with the rest of the household estate. You might hear of him only in passing, if his accounts were especially sharp, or if he was granted a chance to purchase his freedom rare, but not unheard of. And yet, even then, he would not be Athenian. Freedom was not citizenship. He would still need a patron. He could still be struck in public without recourse. He would be tolerated. You can hear the scratch of his stylus now, in a quiet room near the stower. The flick of parchment, the faint exhale as he corrects a tally. He files the numbers. He lights the lamp, and he waits for the lock to turn behind him. The sun casts long shadows across the marble floor of the Athenian law court. Men gather in white robes, holding wax tablets, speaking in crisp, practiced tones. Jurors, drawn from the citizen class, sit in neat rows, listening carefully as arguments unfold. But if you look toward the back, not robed, not seated, a slave standing under the eye of a court-appointed enforcer. They are not here to speak. They are here to be questioned by. Forced in Athenian law, even if they were present when a crime occurred, their spoken testimony was considered unreliable, unless it was extracted under torture. This was not hidden or denied. It was part of the legal process. To get to the truth, they believed, you had to hear it through pain. The term was basanoster. It could involve the rack, the lash, heated metal, or prolonged restraint. A neighbor might request it. A rival might demand it. The accused might protest, might say the slave is honest, loyal, incapable of deceit. It didn't matter. Only confession under duress was considered valid, even if that confession was false. Some masters refused to allow it, but others handed over their servants freely, thinking it better to risk a few bruises than lose an inheritance dispute. The logic was clinical. If the slave is innocent, he will say so. If he is guilty, he will admit it. Either way, the court is satisfied. If you were the one standing there shaking slightly, wrists bound, hoping your master would intervene, you could expect no sympathy. The jurors would not meet your eye. The accuser would speak calmly, with conviction, and you would be led away to a room where the walls did not echo. And yet, in some cases, slaves spoke willingly. They volunteered knowledge to protect others. They whispered secrets behind closed doors. A few were known for their discretion, trusted by powerful households, not because the law required it, but because their silence was valuable. Nor you. Imagine the weight of that knowledge, that no matter how long you served, how well you performed, how closely you guarded your master's affairs, your truth would only count if wrung from your body. This is not justice, it is submission, and yet it was accepted by citizens, by jurists, by philosophers. It was reasoned into the very bones of the city. The whip did not ask questions. It only waited for answers. Now we leave the courtroom and step into a quieter corner of the city. The sun has risen high over the rooftops of Athens. The market bustles. Artisans shout across alleys. Children run with fig-stained fingers. And in the shade of a small columned house, a man sits at his door, running his hands over a wooden bowl. He is not a citizen, but he is no longer enslaved. He is Frida, former slave, now, technically, his own man. He has a name, though most still associated with the household that once owned him. He may run a shop, sell oil, mend sandals, or even teach letters to children, but he will never vote in the assembly. He cannot serve as a juror. He must pay a special tax. He is known as a metic, a resident alien, permanent, tolerated, but never fully included. This quiet exclusion is not loud or violent. It's a matter of doors never opened. His children will inherit his trade. They too will grow up watching the city's decisions from its edge. There are different kinds of freedom in Athens. Legal freedom, social freedom, which is never fully given. The freed slave is caught between the two, respected for his skill, yet always beneath the citizen. Some try to rise higher. A few marry into metic families. Some accumulate modest wealth, but none can enter the body politic. None can speak in the assembly. None can walk past the city's borders with the full rights of those born free. Even in freedom, the line is clear. Still, many choose this uncertain path. To be free, even partially, is to breathe differently, to sleep without listening for footsteps, to work and keep your earnings, to walk through the market carrying your own goods, not another's. Yet the looks remain, the cautious glances, the whispered reminders. That fact lingers, even if the contract no longer binds. In the symposia, your name may be mentioned, not as a guest, but as a curiosity. The slave who now sells lamps, the former servant who copied scrolls, the boy who once stood in silence beside a wealthy man's couch, now teaching children in a back room. A city built on philosophy, freedom, and debate could not bring itself to erase those lines, and so you live just outside the frame, moving with care, speaking with calm, holding your papers, your tools, your bowl, free, but never fully equal. And now, the sun begins to set on the stone walls and worn streets of Athens. The marketplace still hums, but more softly now. Lamps are lit in the courtyards, doors are bolted. The city exhales, and behind its marble facades, the real engine of its greatness settles into shadow once again. Tonight, you walked beside those who rarely walked alone. You felt the early rise of the household slave, her feet bare against cold tile. You watched the clerk scratch symbols into wax with a hand that would never sign his own name. You stood in the stillness of the court, and you rested in the silence of the freedman's house, so close to freedom, yet always just beyond its gates. Athens called itself a democracy, for some, but history is rarely what it claims to be. It is what endures beneath the claims, and what endures most often, quiet, unthanked. So much of civilization was built on the backs of those who never spoke their story aloud. But you have heard it now, not shouted, but whispered, not carved in stone, but carried in gesture, in duty, in repetition. They did not write the plays, but they held the torches, but they swept its floors. And as the city sleeps, so may you. Let the weight of history settle. Let the clatter of bronze and shouts of the agora fade. No tasks are waiting, only the sound of the crickets. Along the olive hills, only sleep, good night, traveler, for drifting through history. Tonight, we wander the marble corridors of a palace, a place where power became theatre and cruelty wore perfume. The statues are flawless. The torches flicker across painted ceilings. And beneath it all, this is Rome, colossal, unshakable. Its laws echo from Britain to Syria. Its roads are arteries of trade and tribute. But at the center, in a palace carved from white stone and glittering excess, but you know him by the name given later Caligula. He was young when he rose to power. Beloved at first, charismatic, a son of heroes. But what followed was not the story Rome expected. It was stranger, sharper. Some said he went mad, and then there was the horse. Tonight, we will follow Caligula's strange reign, not with drama or judgment. We'll trace the gilded edges of his absurdities. Step into the candlelit shadows where fear wore a smile, and ask what happens to an empire when its ruler begins to treat governance like a joke. Later, we'll meet in Citatus. We'll sit quietly with the whispers that pass through Rome's taverns and alleyways. And finally, we'll look into the silk-draped calm of the Roman elite, as the world trembled around them. But first, take a seat beside a column. The banquet has begun, and the emperor is watching. The smell of roast peacock fills the room. Wine flows freely. Candles flicker in golden holders. Musicians play lyres and flutes in a steady, soothing. The hall is wide, the ceiling impossibly high, and the floor inlaid with mosaics that glitter beneath. Sandal soles. You sit near the edge of the room, at the center. His robe is stitched with pearls. A golden laurel presses gently against his brow. His eyes are sharp, scanning, always aware. Guests laugh too quickly at his jokes. They drink when he drinks, eat only when he allows it. This is Caligula's court, but beneath the gold and silk, a kind that never fully leaves the room. Every conversation is weighed, every silence calculated. He might burst into laughter and toss coins to the servant, or he might accuse a senator of treason over the way he looked at a fig. Another time, he declared himself a living god. He built temples in his own name and demanded incense offerings. But here, in this moment, he is calm, smiling, observing. The meal proceeds. Dishes are changed swiftly. Flamingo tongues, dormice, slaves move in silent patterns, bowing low, eyes fixed on the floor. And then, without warning, Caligula stands. The music falters. The guests freeze. He gestures toward a marble column and begins to recite a poem. Something grand and rambling. It doesn't matter. No one will question it. They applaud when he finishes. He nods. Later, he calls a senator forward, speaks softly to him. No one hears the words. The man beside him inches away. This is not madness, and everyone is in the audience. In private, Caligula paces his stables, not ordinary ones. The feed buckets are silver. Incitatus, the animal is groomed with oils, fed oats, mixed with wine, and sleeps on purple blankets. Some laugh at this. The emperor invites Incitatus. He whispers to him in Latin. He tells guests that incitors will soon hold office. Some nod, some laugh nervously. No one dares challenge the joke. People adapt. The absurd becomes expected. Ministers memorize nonsense decrees. Governors interpret silence as policy. The bureaucracy moves forward. And all the while, Caligula smiles. The empire does not stop. Roads are still paved. But those close to power know that the center has gone soft, like fruit left too long in the sun, and beneath the shining surface, something begins to decay. The marble glows in the afternoon light. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, in the emperor's stables, he carries a tray of figs and barley. At the center of the stall stands a tall, striking white horse. This is his name means swift or impetuous, and he is no ordinary animal. He wears a collar of gold. His feed bucket is carved from ivory. He has a team of slaves assigned to clean his hooves, brush his coat, and calm him with music if he's agitated. When storms approach, guards are posted to prevent any noise that might disturb his rest. The horse is a symbol, but not of victory or conquest. He is a reflection of something stranger, of power unchallenged, and of a ruler who saw seriousness as weakness. Caligula was fond of Incitatus. He spoke to him often, sometimes more than he did to his own advisers. He gave him a marble stable. When guests came to dine, he did not speak, but everyone watched him as if he might. The horse became a participant in Rome's political theatre. There is a story, passed through generations, that Caligula planned to make Incitatus a consul, the highest elected office in the Republic. Whether this was true, satire, or threat, no one can say for sure. But it didn't need to be true, because the message was clear. Your position means nothing. Your title means nothing. I can replace you with a horse. Senators, already stripped of power, understood. They laughed politely, applauded the joke, whispered later. Incitatus, of course, remains silent through it all. he trotted calmly. He became a mirror in which Rome saw its helplessness. In the streets, people joked quietly that foreign dignitaries might be received in a stable instead of a hall. But these jokes, though whispered with amusement, because the line between humor and decree had blurred, and no one was sure any more when the emperor was being serious. Incitatus stood quietly, groomed and pampered, while Rome spun in circles, a beast given honors not because he asked for them, but because he could not refuse them, a creature untouched by politics. His hooves tapped softly on marble, his stable shimmered with expense, and while others plotted or panicked, he lived in comfort, unaware of what he represented. To some, Incitatus was a joke, to others, he was a warning, and to Caligula, he was a statement carved in white and gold. Night falls over the Subora district. Oil lamps flicker on cracked windowsills. Somewhere, a lute plays softly behind a curtain. In a quiet tavern, low voices trade, gossip like coins. No names are spoken, only nicknames, codes, glances that say more than words. This is how rumor travels in Rome. It slips through streets at night, dances past, guards, and settles into ears with a whisper, not written on scrolls or spoken from pulpits, but carved gently into the consciousness of a city, too smart to say too much out loud. Caligula is the subject of many such whispers. That he declared war on Neptune and ordered soldiers to gather seashells as spoils, that he walked through the palace at night, speaking only to the moon. Were all these things true? Probably not. But truth was never the point. In an empire where speaking openly could mean excelor, where satire became survival, a well-timed joke shared carefully, was a form of quiet rebellion. Laughter, cautious and clipped, was the only weapon left. Even before Caligula, emperors were the subject of ridicule. Augustus was mocked in stage plays that tiptoed around legality. Tiberius, known for his paranoia, but with Caligula, the jokes turned darker. They were no longer about quirks or bad policy. They were about fear, about unpredictability, about a ruler who might appear at your door one evening, so the people laughed when they could, and when they couldn't, they pretended to. Even the Senate, that ancient body of Roman dignity, became a theatre audience. They applauded declarations they did not understand, voted unanimously for things they secretly dreaded, and when Caligula referred to them as his slaves, some bowed their heads as if confirming it. Years later, after his assassination, the jokes took on new life. Writers like Suetonius and Cassius Dio collected the rumors, adding detail, shaping stories. The line between fact and embellishment faded. Caligula became not just a man. It's possible that some of the wildest stories in Citatas, perhaps they were exaggeration, or perhaps they were real, and no one dared question them at the time. Either way, a dry chuckle behind a curtain, a quiet snort in a tavern corner, the echo of one Roman leaning toward another and saying softly, "Did you hear what he did this week?" And someone replies, eyes flicking to the doorway, "Careful, the walls have ears." In Rome, even absurdity had weight and laughter. The banquet table gleams under lamplight, bronze trays piled high with fruits and honeyed meats. Crystal goblets brim with wine imported from distant provinces. The room is warm with perfume and laughter. At first glance, it's a celebration. But look closely and you'll see something quieter beneath it, a kind of pretending. These are the Roman elite, the senators, and the merchants too wealthy to be considered mere tradesmen. Their sandals are stitched with gold thread. Their language is smooth and well rehearsed. They know which phrases to say and when to say them. They know when to laugh, when to bow, when to glance meaningfully at one another. Without ever breaking the rules of politeness, they live well, but not comfortably, because beneath the cushions and silver, the empire trembles. Caligula's excess is known to them. His cruelty, his whims, his strange declarations, they circulate through the villas and gardens, carried on the voices of servants and guests. But no one speaks of it too plainly. That would be dangerous. So instead, they focus on their next course, their next investment, their next clever remark about poetry or wine. They cling to tradition, to manners, to the illusion of control. The empire has always been strong. Rome always survives. Its emperors. Still, a senator remembers a neighbor who vanished last month. A merchant finds his shipment. A matron receives a dinner invitation written in Caligula's own hand, and for a moment her fingers tremble before she calls for her finest gown. At night, the lamps in these homes burn later than they used to, not out of celebration, because no one knows what tomorrow will bring. Not in a regime where horses are honored. Some cope through more fountains, more imported silks, more musicians. Others retreat inward, composing stoic reflections about how to accept a world out of balance. A few send quiet letters to distant cousins, suggesting that maybe it's time to visit the countryside for a while. But most stay. Because they believe this, too, shall pass. And if it doesn't, they will at least be seen, feasting, smiling, dressed for greatness. That, after all, is what a Roman does. Even when the fruit on the table is overripe, even when the wine tastes, even when the walls behind their polished surface begin to crack, they toast to the empire. And they keep dancing, even as the floor begins to shift beneath them. And now, the banquet is over. The guests have gone. The musicians have packed their instruments. The torches burn low along the colonnades, their glow stretched into long shadows across the marble floors. Rome is quiet. In the palace, somewhere beyond heavy doors, a man who called himself a god sleeps beneath silk, dreaming of battles that never happened, of glories he invented, of power so absolute it needed no sense. And the empire, it breathes, it waits. Tonight, you followed the path of a strange emperor, not by his triumphs, but by his excesses. You walked through banquet halls lined with fear. You watched a horse become more than a man in the eyes of power. You heard the whispers pass between breaths, between drinks, between silences, too deep. You stepped into the lives of those who smiled at the storm because they had no choice. History remembers Caligula with mockery, with horror, with fascination. But behind the tales lies something quieter, a truth about fragility, that even marble cracks, that even empires built on law and order can slip quietly into theater. And when they do, the audience must pretend not to notice. So sleep now. Let the absurdities fall away. Let the sound of sandals on mosaic, the distant neigh of a pampered horse, the rustle of silk at a banquet table fade into stillness. There is no throne here, no emperor watching, only the soft hush of time, brushing gently over what was once so loud. For drifting through history, tonight we walk into the corridors of power, not through a palace, through the long, narrow courtyards where boots and where names are forgotten as loyalty is forged. This is the world of the Janissaries, the Ottoman Empire's elite corps, the guardians of the Sultan, the silent edge of the empire's ambition, revered and feared, praised for their discipline, their precision. But beneath the uniform is something far more quiet, a long, difficult life, a rhythm of obedience, a childhood taken and reshaped. We'll watch how power shifted hands, how the corps rose above their commanders, and how their end came not from defeat in war, but from within the empire they once served. You may know them by their long tunics. Tonight, you will not stand at the head of the army. You will not command legions or draw up battle plans in a quiet Christian village under Ottoman rule. Instead, you will wake in the cold stone dormitory of a Janissary novice, feeling the ache of a body pushed past comfort, the silence of a language once spoken, and the weight of service that never truly ends. Later, we'll follow them into the city as they gather around coffee pots and firelocks. But first, we begin in the mountains. A boy plays in the dust. He does not know that today his life will be The sun rises over the Balkan. The wind carries the scent of sheep and damp stone. A bell rings somewhere, soft and metallic, calling villagers to prayer or labor. Ottoman scribes and soldiers on horseback. They carry scrolls and soft leather satchels, their voices low and practiced. The villagers know what this is. It happens every few years. In a small clearing, a boy runs barefoot, his laughter quick and high. He chases a wooden hoop. His mother calls him inside for bread and milk. This is the last day. He will hear her voice. The mother protests. The father lowers his head. Resistance is not wise, and he walks. He does not know it yet, but the officials have arrived. By the time they reach Istanbul, their old names are still on their tongues, but already fading. Lentils, poetry, mathematics, swordplay, wrestling. They are taught to read and recite. Not all will become soldiers. Some will rise through the bureaucracy. Others will join the Sultan's personal guard. Flatbread. He keeps his boots polished. He does not speak unless spoken to. His body grows lean and strong. His eyes remain quiet. Sometimes onions, meals are eaten in silence. Mistakes are corrected with firm precision. Praise is rare, but unmistakable when given. The collection, prestige. Then comes discipline rising at dawn. The boys are gathered in the churchyard. Those between the ages of 8 and 18, they are inspected not cruelly, but firmly. The scribes look for strength. One boy has a cough. He is passed over. Another flinches when spoken to. He is set aside. And then there is the boy with quiet eyes and steady posture. He is chosen. There is no ceremony, no farewell. He is told he is being taken to serve the Sultan, that he will be educated, clothed. The road is long. Dozens of boys from villages scattered across the empire. They are silent. Some cry at night. Others do not speak at all. The gates close behind them. First, washed, clothed, taught the prayers of Islam. Their old languages are gently suppressed. Turkish becomes their world. The food is simple. They are taught music. The boy from the mountains begins to forget the color of his village church. He dreams now in Turkish. He is no longer a villager. The path is not cruel, but it is total. It is not brutal, but it is unrelenting. There is pride here, but the price was memory, and the uniform he earns will never quite fit the boy who once ran barefoot through the trees. The courtyard is still in the grey hour before dawn. The air is sharp. A bell rings softly, not a clang, but a deep, measured tone that rolls out over the barracks like a reminder. The room fills with motion, but no chaos. Each man knows exactly what comes next. The janissaries rise. No shouts, no conversation, just the sound of feet moving to the floor, of blankets folded tightly, of boots drawn on with practiced speed, not out of fear, but because that is what is done. 1,000 repetitions have made it effortless. There is no questioning the order of things here. Routine is comfort. Routine is survival. A row of young men kneels in prayer, backs straight, their breath visible in the cool morning. These men were not called from farms or summoned from inns. They lived this life every day without end. Then, each man is both his own commander and his own servant. Some janissaries write with a careful hand. There is comfort in the rhythm. Others tend to gardens, grow herbs, repair tools, sword drills, first sharp turns, balanced footwork, a dozen strikes, executed in silence. For many years, they may never leave the cause at all. They sleep among brothers, always. A janissary does not rest until the blade shines, the barrel gleams, the lock moves smoothly under pressure. Then musket handling. Janissaries were among the earliest soldiers to carry firearms as standard equipment. Men sit and polish boots, sew torn tunics, review commands. One man tunes a stringed instrument, playing quietly to himself. But in these quiet hours, before sleep, they are simply men. Tired, young, old, neither fully themselves, nor fully remade. Another reads aloud in Ottoman Turkish, slowly, the way one reads, not to impress, but to remember. They drilled with powder, ramrod, and firelock, until muscle replaced thought. Lentils, bread, a thin stew, water served in copper cups. Janissaries do not overindulge. They are not paid to enjoy. The Janissary Corps was not a ragtag force. It was the first standing army in Europe. Their bodies moved with unity. Afterward, they cleaned their weapons. There is no place here for pride, no flourish. Their clothing is plain but cared for. Their belts must lie flat. Midday brings rest, but it is not freedom. Meals are eaten in rows, in silence, with gratitude. After the meal comes study, reading, calligraphy. The cause is not merely martial, it is monastic in its discipline. The day moves like a wheel, task after task, drill after drill, and yet it is a lonely life. Janissaries are forbidden to marry. They own no land. Their loyalty belongs to the Sultan and no one else. But a brotherhood born of silence is not the same as friendship. When evening falls, the courtyard fills with low light. Their barracks are clean, their movements precise. They are feared across Europe, hated by rebels. They march without question, but every step has a weight. They serve without complaint, and when the lamps are finally extinguished, not emptiness, the smell of cardamom and roasted beans. Shops creak open along the stone streets, and the city begins its slow morning rhythm. At a small coffee house, a group of men sits cross-legged on cushions. Their boots rest by the door. Their muskets lean gently against the wall. These are Janissaries, but not in formation, not in drill. This is their other life. It begins with coffee. The Janissaries adopted the bitter, black drink, early and fiercely. Coffee houses became their meeting ground spaces, to think, to talk, a quiet shadow. Government controlled grain markets, a few, both, not loud, just calm, controlled conversation beneath low wooden ceilings and walls painted with Ottoman motifs. They drink with small sips, a rumor from the palace, a shipment delayed at the harbor, a new officer appointed, another dismissed. He remembered the rules, even as he quietly bent them. The information flows, and so does the influence, because by the 17th century, the Janissary Corps was no longer just an elite fighting force. It was a political body. They owned shops, and when displeased, not violently, a sultan's advisor could find himself removed, his home burned, his name erased, all without a single battle cry. Decisions once made in palaces were now anticipated in barracks, and as the city moved around them, the Janissaries watched. But by negotiation with men who once stood at attention and now lounged over coffee with their firelocks beside them, the Janissaries had become more than soldiers. They were enforcers of their own interests. Their muskets once symbols of the state's. It was a delicate balance. He paid them well, built new barracks, and issued silken uniforms. But he also feared them, because when the cause decided a leader had failed them, sultans were not immune. Some were overthrown. More than one learned to rule not by decree, and yet, even in this period of influence, the Janissary lived with discipline. He did not shout, he did not boast, he drank, yes, but never in excess. And still, beneath the wealth and politics, the rhythm of the cause remained. The boots were polished, the rifles clean, the prayers whispered before dawn. For every Janissary who grew powerful, another remained quietly in the barracks, marching, drilling, keeping watch. But the balance had shifted. From servants of the empire, from soldiers under command, and so the streets changed. Coffee houses swelled with quiet power, armed. The morning is warm. The sky over Istanbul hangs pale and cloudless in the great square near the barracks, but their uniforms no longer match. The gold-threaded turbans of high-ranking veterans mingle with the stained boots of new recruits, and in their hands are muskets still deadly, still loud but pointed, not at enemies, but at change. For centuries, they had been trained, reshaped, and the Ottoman court. But by the 19th century, those roots had begun to rot. The world was changing. Europe's armies drilled with new tactics, new weapons, new discipline. The Janissaries had become immovable. They had grown powerful, independent, and deeply unwilling to be made ordinary again. And one June morning in 1826, he revealed them. They resisted reforms, refused to adopt new methods, opposed modernization with silence, then with threats, and finally with fire. They no longer trained, no longer marched as one. Some still did, yes, but they shouted, demanded the abolition of the new army, demanded obedience, as they had grown used to. A quiet phrase for a violent purge. Fires consumed the buildings that once echoed with discipline and prayer. He built a new army in secret, hired European instructors, drilled them outside the Janissaries' watchful eyes. The Janissaries protested. Now they were ghosts, their silence replaced by ash. Their barracks turned to rubble, their long rhythm of duty unbroken for 400 years ended in a single morning. They gathered in the square, but Mahmud did not bow. He ordered the artillery forward, tried, executed. Others vanished into the countryside. Their coffee houses closed, their shops seized. Their name once honored, feared, revered was erased from imperial rolls. The cannons rolled into position. Their barrels gleamed in the sun. Smoke choked the square. The Janissary barracks were shelled. This moment would be remembered as the auspicious incident. And yet, the empire did not cheer, because something old had died. The Janissaries had once symbolized loyalty, and as the smoke lifted, the cause that had guarded sultans, shaped politics, and carried the empire across centuries was gone, not fallen, not lost to time, but deliberately extinguished. Because power, once granted and nurtured, can never be easily reclaimed. And so the empire moved forward, but it never quite marched. And now the boots are quiet. The courtyard is empty. The muskets are gone. The dormitories that once echoed with morning drills lie still beneath the city's newer stones. But if you listen closely, you might still hear them, the faint rhythm of footsteps, perfectly timed, fading into memory. You rose with him at dawn. You listened to their voices, measured and calm, shaping the empire, not with violence, but with presence. You felt the pride of discipline. Tonight, you walked among the Janissaries. The Sultan's cannons aimed not at enemies, but at tradition. A centuries-old rhythm broken in a single, decisive moment. You followed a boy from a distant village. Later, you sat with them in the coffee houses. You watched them drift from soldiers to citizens, from servants of the Sultan to brokers of quiet power. And then, the barracks burning, history remembers the Janissaries as many things elite, fearsome, stubborn, corrupt. But behind every title was a life. Hundreds of thousands of them has died watching, but they were not unthinking. Let the scent of coffee and oiled leather drift away. Let the rhythm of their march fall into the distance. The past has walked on. They obeyed without hesitation, but they remembered everything. Their story is not loud. It does not end in a final battle or a glorious last stand. It ends in silence. And now, that silence is yours. So breathe in. No cannon fire. Only sleep. Only the soft hush of history, closing its pages for the night. Good night, for drifting through history.